This episode, we are diving back to kind of the early days of what we would consider the heyday of horror, the golden age for us. And we're jumping back to 1980, and we're going to talk about a movie that we're going to connect to Halloween, and we're going to connect to Friday the 13th, and we're going to connect to Carrie, and we're going to connect to pretty much everything else in horror, which is kind of weird. You're thinking to yourself, what the hell are you talking about that could be like the pinnacle of all of this stuff horror? And we're talking about another Jamie Lee Curtis movie this time, and we're talking about 1980's Prom Night.
This is one of those Jamie Lee Curtis becoming the Scream Queen films. After Halloween, she was known as a Scream Queen, and she had a string of movies like this. I mean, Halloween 2, Terror Train, which we visited already, and Prom Night, and I think there might have been one or two more. The Fog, I guess that kind of goes along with that early 80s Scream Queen stuff. But this is kind of like one of those movies similar to like My Bloody Valentine, similar to The Prowler, similar to a bunch of movies that came out in the early 80s that followed the Halloween trend, and this was the beginning of the slasher era.
It really was, and like you said, this is kind of in line with Jamie Lee Curtis's rise to fame before she broke off and started doing the comedy movies like Trading Places and those movies, and then, you know, going on to do stuff. Was that True Lies with Arnold Schwarzenegger and stuff? But this movie actually is one of the, if it wasn't the first one, it definitely was early on that took advantage of Jamie Lee Curtis's sexuality in a way that, you know, really kind of exploited that a little bit, even though you didn't see Jamie Lee Curtis nude in this movie. You do see Jamie Lee Curtis semi-topless. You get to see her prance around in a bra for a little bit. But this movie...
Yeah, you sent me the link on that one.
And the picture that I sent you of it, and I'll post a picture of it online too, I don't care. The picture that I posted, or I sent to you, I took as I was watching the movie, but I think there's actually almost an exact duplicate of that picture that floats around on the internet. If you look up Jamie Lee Curtis Prom Night, you'll see the picture of her holding the steel door open, and she's like in this bra, just all hanging out for all the world to see.
Yeah, I've seen that shot before. Yeah, this was her time. You know, she was like one of the original Scream Queens that I can't think of another one who had a string of films, really. You know, I mean, you look at like the Friday Girls, and it was always somebody different every movie. Or, I mean, oh, you know what? Okay, so there's Amy Seal. She had Friday 2, then she had April Fool's Day. But like that, Adrienne King didn't do anything else.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say too. You know, I mean, Amy Seal made 2 movies. But other than that, even if you look at some of the folks up into probably the mid-'80s, can you really name anybody that was in multiple horror movies from a Scream Queen perspective? You really can't. I mean, I'm sure there probably are a couple, but I mean, nothing that really comes to mind. I mean, there's some guys out there, of course, that, you know, you could probably label that with, but even that, you know, this was in 1980, so this was really at the point where sequels were kind of starting to become a thing. Friday the 13th came out on May 9th, 1980, and this actually came out, I think, a little bit later in the year. I think this came out in July. This is one of the things I found humorous getting ready for this episode. This is one of those movies that I've seen multiple times over the years. This isn't one of those movies that I would say was one of our childhood favorite movies. I actually don't know that I was even really aware that this movie ever really existed when I was a kid until I was probably in my 20s, or hell, maybe even 30s, I don't know. I mean, there's another movie that shares a name with this movie that was one of our childhood favorites, But
Yeah.
I don't remember us ever watching Prom Night before or after us watching Prom Night 2 ever. I don't remember exactly the first time I saw this movie, but I do know that, at least in the most recent years, the couple of times that I have watched this movie, the one thought always pops into my head is, man, this is such a ripoff of Halloween combined with Carrie. It is like insane. It's like somebody said, let's make Carrie, but let's make it kind of with the story of Halloween. And somebody went, that's a good idea, let's do that. And then it's funny, when I was getting ready for this episode and was kind of looking into some of the stuff, it seems like every review you can find of this movie from a critic's standpoint, 1980 when it came out, August of 1980, pretty much everybody said the same exact thing. So it's like Halloween meets Carrie. And I was like, huh, that's weird.
When is the first time you saw this movie?
It could have been actually not that long ago, but maybe within the last 10 years, I bet.
Believe it or not, I saw this film before I saw Mary Lou.
Ugh, are you serious?
I am dead serious.
Did your mom take you to see this when you were 4 years old?
No, this is what happened. This is the story for me. Prom Night was one of those films that was on TV really late, late at night, and I remember watching it with the family. Back in the early 80s when you're really little, and the movie of the week was on, and your family would all kind of get together and watch whatever was on TV. Well, Prom Night was one of those films. And all I remembered was as a little kid, so it must have been so if it was 1980 when it came out in the theater, I'm guessing it would have been 81 or 82 when it was put on TV a couple years later, probably, maybe 83. So I would have been let's see, maybe 6 or 7, somewhere around there. And anyhow, so that's the first time I saw it, and the only thing I ever remembered was the beginning of the film, when the kids scare the other kid out the window. She ends up falling out of the window, and so I remembered that for when I was really little. Oh yeah, there's this movie I saw where there's these kids. They're like, we're gonna get you, and they scare this little girl, and she falls out of a window. And then we ended up getting a VCR in the mid '80s. So about 3 or 4 years later, we finally got a VCR, and we had a Betamax, and finally, I'm like, what was that film with that? And my mom told me, oh, it was this. And surprise, surprise, they actually had it at the video store we used to go to, and I rented it. And it was one of those films that I don't know how, for whatever reason, my parents were really weird. There were certain movies oh, we can't rent that, but, oh, okay, we'll rent this. And I don't know what their logic was behind it, because it didn't really make sense. But anyhow, Prom Night, an R-rated movie, they rented for me. I think a couple of times, or a few times, because I watched it, and I remember watching it on beta and oh, okay, yeah, it's because I was really into the slasher thing in the 80s because of Halloween. So yeah, that was the first time and then I saw it all the way through, and then I remember watching the intro, oh yeah, that's the movie I was thinking of, but I didn't remember anything else past that. And that was right before Mary Lou, and then because when Mary Lou came out, I was like, Prom Night 2, oh, interesting. And then when you watch it, you obviously know that there's no connection at all to the first film.
I would have to imagine that it was probably within the last, probably 10 years or so for me, and I think it might have actually even been after the two of us kind of reconnected years and years ago.
That was your first time?
Probably, because I think it was one of those things to where, and I'm not saying this for a fact, but I know I never rented it before, because when, we used to watch Prom Night 2 all the time when we were kids, and then when we reconnected, whenever that was, 10, 12 years ago, one of the things that we did was we revisited Prom Night 2, and we'll save that for a different episode. But it was one of those things to where, with a lot of movies, because, I'll admit, there are still a lot of movies from especially the 80s, that I've never seen. You know, I mean, and there's, you know, I mean, if you're going to sit there and try to tell me that, you know, you've seen every horror movie ever made, bullshit, you know? So, you know, there's movies I've never seen, but there are certain times where you're like, you know what, I've never seen this movie, I'm going to check it out. And so I think watching Prom Night was probably one of those movies that I had probably gotten to the point where I was like, you know what, I've never seen that movie before, I should check that out sometime. But I don't remember the first time I ever seen it. I could have seen it when I was 10. I don't actually, honestly don't remember. And actually part of that, which this is maybe jumping to us rating the movie a little bit, but honestly part of that is probably because this movie is really forgettable for most part. So, you know, if I would have seen it whenever, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I honestly don't remember ever seeing it. And it's one of those movies to where, you know, it's not a movie that I'll pull out and, you know, like, oh, hey, I gotta watch Prom Night. You know, it's October, I gotta watch Prom Night. You know, probably the next time I see it, there'll probably be a lot of it that I'll be like, oh, yeah, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, it's definitely not an annual viewing for me. And I don't recall ever revisiting it within the last maybe, 20 years or so, until recently, you know, for the show. It's an interesting film because it's kind of really captures the era, you know, like the beginning of the slasher phase. I mean, Prom Night, My Bloody Valentine. And I honestly, I think there is a connection. I might be wrong on this, but there's certain elements of the score where it sounded like they used the exact same score as the original My Bloody Valentine. And I think I remember reading something that was the case. And then when I watched it this time, I was like, that music sounds really familiar. So I think that, and they're both Canadian films, so that might lead into it as well. But yeah, if you listen to the score, there were certain parts of it that were like, wow, that's like My Bloody Valentine. So
maybe that's what it was, because it's Canadian and Canada only has like one score they use for all their movies.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I was looking for that beer, but it didn't look like anybody was drinking it at the prom.
I almost was going to text you earlier today when I was doing some stuff, and then I was like, oh shit, this is a Canadian movie. I had no idea. That totally got past me. Then I was like, oh, I hope you got some Molson left over or whatever you were drinking last time.
Actually, I do. Actually, I still have Newcastle left over. I got like so many beers from our shows. It's funny. I've got like a collection of like everything we've done so far, especially that Goose Island crap from Swamp Thing.
Oh,
like I will not touch that stuff. I got that. I got Newcastle. I think I got 2 Newcastles left. I got at Moosehead. I've got 4 of those. Just finished my PBR today, so that's good. Maybe I'll start cracking into the old the Canadian stuff.
Oh, there you go. I might have a Molson down. That's what I was drinking last time, was Molson. I might have a couple of those down there yet. Yeah, my
what did you think?
Beer fridge is like that too. It's just got an array of beers because I'll pick up a 6-pack or a 12-pack and I'll drink a couple of them, and then I'll pick up another one and I'll drink a couple of those, and so I'll end up, you know, having. At any given time, I'll have 8 or 9 different types of beer in the fridge. And then there's a couple of times, like, you know, especially now, this time of year, to where, you know, you might get some bad weather come through, so I might not, you know, make it to the grocery store or whatever. And I'll be like, oh, you know, I might have some beer tonight. And then I'll deplete it a little bit. Maybe that's what we should start doing is coming up with, and I know we kind of do it behind the scenes a little bit, but start coming up with beer themes for our recording sessions.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We should have stuck with a Canadian beer this week. I sure should. I could. Well, I can probably squeeze a Moosehead in eventually.
But you know
what? What do you think of this film?
Well, I'll tell you, I know this movie's got a cult following from doing this, and from, you know, being the age that we are. You know, there are certain movies that we enjoy from the 80s that probably aren't worthy of anybody enjoying them. I know that we've covered several movies on here that are considered cult classics. And this would fall into the line with some of those movies that we've covered in the past, such as Terror Train, that I just don't get how this movie has a following that it has. It's really not a good movie. I mean, it's almost kind of falls in line with Terror Train and Black Christmas, to where it's really, really early on in the slasher phase. I mean, I know that there's some elements of Halloween in this movie. I mean, Halloween I would consider a straight up slasher movie. This movie I would kind of almost put in line with Black Christmas, which technically was before the slasher phase, so the pseudo slasher movie, because this movie is really not gory at all. And it really doesn't have a slasher feel to it, even though you understand that's what's going on. It's weird that this movie came out after Friday the 13th came out, because when you watch this movie and then you watch Friday the 13th, or you watch Friday the 13th and then you watch this one, they almost feel like they were filmed in different time periods, which we've talked about before on here. There's certain movies where you see, or certain TV shows that you see, and you're like, man, was this made in 1982? Because that's what this feels like. It feels like a 1982 movie.
Right.
And this feels more like a 1976 movie to me, or a 1977 movie. I mean, it has that like disco feel to it.
Yeah, that was so weird that you say that. And also, there was another thing I noticed too, and like some of the camera work that was done in this film, I don't know if I would call it dated or if I would call it just kind of odd. Like some of the things I don't know, camera tricks or whatever. And like if you watch the original Halloween, the 1978 Halloween film, it sort of kind of holds up as like, as a classic. It doesn't. It's dated, yes, of course. You see everybody in bell bottoms and all of that, but you see like 1960s and 70s cars throughout. But for some reason, it kind of holds up on its own, just the way it was shot. Now, again, it doesn't look like a modern film per se, but it has like sort of you can kind of watch that nowadays and say, okay, yeah, I can kind of go with it. But this one, like the way it's shot and some of the camera things they do and some of the tricks seem like it's like kind of dated a little bit, or just kind of strange decisions they made, and that was kind of weird for me. Like I don't like. There's like some of those like shots where they like do like the close up, like all of the sped up close up, kind of like a hokey, probably early '80s technique that they were trying. And another thing too about this film that like I thought was, going back into the whole like we're kind of sort of critiquing it, was like a lot of the editing was weird or strange. Like the death scenes were very bizarre. Like, I mean, I think of like the first one that really comes to mind was like when the girl's leaning up against the back of the van, and then the killer like opens the door and she falls over and he like stabs her in the neck. It's just a really weird way that they shot that whole scene. It's like, and then he makes this weird like kind of grunting or breathing noise while he's stabbing her, and it's just like you like, I don't know, watching it now, it just kind of, I don't know if it's dated or if it just feels just awkward. You're like, oh, that's a weird way to film a death scene.
Like I said, it has that kind of weird, not slasher feel to it. Almost, it gets compared a lot to Halloween and Carrie, which I myself compared it to those two. But another one you can actually kind of almost throw in the mix there a little bit is like Maniac a little bit. Or, like Black Christmas, like I said, to where it kind of have that, I don't know, it's weird, like trying to like cause some suspense or whatever from more than just, building up suspense from like, I mean, to compare it to Halloween again, some of the camera angles, but then also some of the tension from the soundtrack and stuff. But to this one, like you're saying, with some of the like the kind of stuff, like just weird.
Yeah, it was kind of weird how they did that. They like kind of decided to go that route with some of the like the kill scenes, and like the kill scenes aren't very memorable either. They just seem kind of like, I don't know, they're shot in a very strange way where you're just sort of like, oh, okay, well, all right, I guess that's how they're doing it. And they're not very memorable. Or typically with a slasher film, you like remember that like the death scenes pretty well. And like a good example, like Friday the 13th movies, like you remember like, oh yeah, when the girl gets her throat slashed in the woods, or the guy's hanging upside down, and and that kind of stuff. You just have like this one, they're just kind of done in a very strange way. Again, this is before this is like real early slasher film, kind of a copycat of Halloween, so they probably weren't quite as creative as they would be later on.
Which is weird because it came out after Friday the 13th.
Yeah, they were kind of filming it right around the same time.
So, it's weird that you had one that ended up birthing its entire franchise, which Prom Night in itself kind of sort of did. It had several sequels and was remade as well, but which is kind of funny because I don't, outside of Hello Mary Lou Prom Night 2, I don't know if I've ever seen any of the other sequels to this one. There was 4 of them altogether, 4 Prom Night movies altogether.
Yeah.
And then the 2009 movie, or 2008, whatever it was. I think that Prom Night, though, I think is kind of unique in a way to where Hello Mary Lou has nothing to do with Prom Night at all. And I don't know if the other 2 sequels had anything. I don't think I've ever seen either of those. And then when the remake came out in 2008 or whenever it was, that was kind of the same way, where they were just like, oh, we're going to remake Prom Night in quotes because we're just going to use the name and we're going to make it on Prom Night. Nothing else is going to be the same at all.
Yeah, it was one of those strange, let's just take the name and, just start a whole new franchise here, or a whole new movie.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with the original. Yeah, I remember when the third one came out, I think the second one was the second one was had a theatrical release, probably pretty limited. But when the third one came out, we're going straight to video stores at that point. And I remember seeing that one like in the new releases, Prom Night 3. And yeah, you're right. The third one and I believe the fourth one had nothing to do with either previous film, either Mary Lou or
weird.
The original. Yeah, it's one of those franchises where it's all about the name recognition, and they just kind of kept making movies using the Prom Night name to kind of get people to watch it. But by the time of the third one, they stopped even worrying about continuity or anything like that. It was just all about, okay, Prom Night 3, okay, whole new story, whole new thing, and this is what it's about. And I don't think I ever saw it, but I do remember our mutual friend and I think we might have rented it one time when we were kids, but I'm not 100% sure. This original Prom Night, I did, as a kid, I really did like this. This is a revenge story. I remember thinking it was nowhere like in the ballpark or the caliber of Halloween by any means. Even as a kid, it's weird. Like I think about that, it's like, yeah, I knew that Halloween was like so far beyond like a much better film than this one or a lot of the stuff that was coming out. But this one was like, I remember enjoying it when I was a lot younger, and it's basically the story of a bunch of kids are playing in this old abandoned building, and they're like scaring this one little girl, and she ends up falling out the window. Well, anyhow, then the kids make a pact that they're never going to tell anybody that they were responsible for scaring her, or like whatever. So years later, you find out that all these kids are teenagers, and it's prom night, and they're all going out, and then there's a serial killer out there killing them, picking them off one by one. And spoiler alert, it turns out to be the brother of the little girl who was killed, who you kind of see towards the beginning of the film, like he's the one who comes up and finds her body and all that stuff. But so it's basically a revenge film, which kind of gives it like the killer a motive, which is sort of weird in a way, because like you think of like Halloween, like Michael Myers didn't have a motive, and I guess Jason kind of did, as with like the revenge of the death of his mother, or his death, or whatever, based on whatever storyline you're looking at with that. But and they used like the whole prom night. Okay, it kind of goes back to the whole like they were using holidays and special events and everything for movies back then. So you had Halloween, Friday the 13th, My Bloody Valentine, whatever. Prom night, that's kind of like they were always looking for like that event or thing that they could kind of put the film base the film in that period of time.
One of the things we didn't mention about this movie yet, and I'm surprised that it hasn't come up, even though he's really not known for his horror street cred.
Oh,
and that would be, although he is in another horror movie that we've talked about before, Leslie Nielsen is in this movie. And this was, again, before he was really known for being a comedic actor. But it always is one of those things when you're watching this, or even Creepshow, and he comes on, and you're like, what? Why is the guy from Naked Gun in this? That's weird.
Yeah, it's so funny that when he came onto the screen, I was like, huh? Because I didn't remember that at all. I had no idea that totally forgot that he was in this film.
It's funny when you talk about that, the killer being the brother of her, and maybe I should pay more attention to this because I don't ever remember at the beginning of the movie when they are taunting the girl and she backs out of the window, which I think is kind of funny. A couple of things. One, putting it back in perspective with Friday the 13th. Another thing that this kind of had similar to that one was, they were like, oh, whatever's going to come and get you. But they were like chanting, like, kill, 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 kill. And, like, scared her out and she backed out of the window, which kind of always reminds me of Friday the 13th when, Pamela Voorhees is, going crazy and she's like, kill her, mommy, kill him. Kind of that thing. But to get to my point is, when she crashes out of the window and falls to her death, I don't think they actually showed that little boy at the beginning of the movie. So it's like, kind of to be like a whatever big reveal at the end of the movie, which they did that in a number of movies. But another one that I always thought of in a similar fashion to that was Sleepaway Camp is really another good example of that, to where when they do the big reveal at the end of the movie, like, oh, hey, here's the killer. And then they kind of do this, in quotes, twist ending, to what, like, somehow you're supposed to be able to, like, oh, I should have totally have seen that coming. You're like, what? Where did he, who? How? Okay, whatever. Like that kind of a feel to it.
Yeah. Which
to me is just kind of like, I don't know, bad writing, I guess. I'll just put it at that.
Yeah, it's a little. Yeah, they kind of. It's sort of like, it could have been better. Could have been put together a little better. Oh, also another thing I want to bring up too. I was wrong about the My Bloody Valentine connection, but here's. I had said that the music was used in My Bloody Valentine as well, and I think it might have been the same guy who did it, but because it sounded very familiar. But apparently, some of the score was actually used in 1981's Ghost Keeper, which I never saw. But also, they used some of the score from Prom Night in 1983's Curtains, which so I guess there's some
weird,
which is interesting. Yeah, because I knew that like some of that music sounded familiar, some of that soundtrack stuff that was going on there. Sounded a lot like My Bloody Valentine, though, so I want to go back and check if this Paul Zaza guy also did My Bloody Valentine, because it really, really did sound quite a bit like that. And again, they're both Canadian films.
I'm telling you, Canada, they have one guy who does scores. And he wrote one score.
You know what? I was right. My Bloody Valentine, Paul Zaza. So he must have used some very similar things in that movie, too. So he did Curtains, Prom Night, and My Bloody Valentine.
Goes back to what I was saying. Yep. Canada, you only have one guy who scores movies.
And only one brewery out there, too, Moosehead. At the end of the day, what do you say? Heads up or heads down or thumbs up? Oh, heads.
Heads,
thumbs.
What are we doing?
Thumbs up or thumbs down?
Heads up, 7 Up. Well, I would have to say, which I know this might not be a popular opinion amongst some of our listeners, but I'm going to have to go ahead and say, well, I'll do it this way. If you want to see Jamie Lee Curtis a young Jamie Lee Curtis prancing around in a bra, I'd give that a thumbs up. That scene is definitely thumbs up worthy. But the rest of the movie, I'd give it a thumbs down. It's not. I wouldn't even label this in the loosest way possible as a beer and popcorn movie. This is, I don't even know if I would say this is one of those movies that you should see if you've never seen. It's just really not that great of a movie. As we've said before, it's, if you've seen Halloween, which is a fantastic movie, if you've seen Carrie, which is a fantastic movie, you've pretty much already seen this movie to a certain extent. But other than the drawing power of the sexuality of Jamie Lee Curtis, this movie has nothing to offer.
Yeah, this is a hard one for me. Because I do have a tiny little bit of a nostalgia for it. I mean, I'm not a huge fan by any means, and I'm certainly not going to watch it again. But I guess, like, if you look at it as an era film, like, okay, you've got one of those off the beaten path slasher films, or whatever, like that kind of not one of the big franchises, like obviously like Halloween or Friday the 13th. And this one to me doesn't live up to like the cult classic status as like My Bloody Valentine, which I think is a more fun. That's probably one of the best beer and popcorn movies out there. But like, so but I don't know that I want to completely give it the negative, the thumbs down. I'm gonna have to kind of go in like the halfway with this one, and I know that's maybe a little weird for us, but I can't fully give it a thumbs up, but I can't fully give it a thumbs down. So I have to kind of have like a neutral. Again, if you want to look for a slasher film and just kind of get an idea of what Jamie Lee Curtis was about back then, like this one, I would recommend this one about 2 steps above like Terror Train. Which is another one with Jamie Lee Curtis. That one I thought was even worse than this. And then Black Christmas, which you and I didn't like. I would prefer, I guess, Prom Night over that one as well. But I like all 3 of those films kind of have the same like vibe to them, where you're sort of like, it's a slasher film, but you don't really, it doesn't have the quality like that later slasher films would have. So I don't know. I'm very neutral on this. I got to give it like I guess if I had to do up or down, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a thumbs up, just for the fact that it's a slasher era film, and if you want to stretch out a little bit and find one of those more obscure slashers, I check this one out because it does have that, it gives you an idea of what was going on in the early '80s, I guess.
I hate to say it, but to go back on what I said before, if you're really looking for some spank-worthy Jamie Lee Curtis movie moments, I mean, this isn't even the best one. I mean, True Lies is better than this one, and there's a couple of movies where she gets nude in, so...
Well, yeah, I barely recommend it, but again, it's just for, like, the horror... Well, so Prom Night, kind of a mixed review, but I think we both kind of agree at the end of the day that it's not something that you're really going to want to run out and go watch.
Give Halloween a viewing, or give Carrie a viewing.
Yeah, go for the big ones first. This is for the horror enthusiast, just to kind of get this under your belt. Like, yeah, I watched that one.